Resident Evil series is no stranger when it comes to having spin-off titles. However, the last couple of efforts were not really, well, good to say the least. But that hasn't stopped Capcom in the past, and now they're trying out another multiplayer Resident Evil game with Project Resistance. Earlier in October, a weekend-long closed beta test was sent out to anyone who signed up for it while being a part of Capcom's own Resident Evil Ambassador program. I was able to play the beta during this period, and I wanted to get my overall impressions out there, even if it is a tad bit late at this point. Now, despite the rather mixed reception the game got prior to the beta, primarily due to the game not being the new Resident Evil Outbreak style game people wanted, I was still very curious about how it would play hands-on. Now, I really hate to be that guy, but after playing the closed beta, Project Resistance became one of the most frustrating experiences I've had with a game all year. Yet it's also something I can see being pretty solid if the correct measures are taken to improve the overall quality before its eventual release. So what is Project Resistance? Well, it's an asymmetrical multiplayer game set in the Resident Evil universe, where 4 different survivors team up to escape from a controlled experiment led by an evil mastermind. In order for one side to win, either the player controlling the mastermind causes the time limit to run out by dealing damage, or the 4 players on the survivor team successfully escape. Only one map was available to play, but the mastermind can change the surveillance camera, item, and objective layouts before each match. Now, I actually do like the premise the game is going for, and I can see the gameplay potential here. Finding out if a team of 4 people can outsmart one other person and vice versa is honestly something I can see being fun in an online multiplayer environment, if it's done correctly. Now, if you're familiar with the excellent Resident Evil 2 remake that came out earlier this year, you should be right at home with how the survivors play, although this game adds its own mechanics on top of it. You see, each survivor here is a different character class. There's the damage dealer, the tank, the healer, and the hacker. They all have their own set of abilities that are more or less necessary in order to survive. For example, Tyrone's Fever skill, this game's name for a survivor's ultimate ability, grants him and his nearby allies a temporary defense boost. While
you, it's January!
Can set off an EMP, temporarily disabling the Mastermind's cameras on the map that can interfere with his enemy and trap placement. The beta offered limited customization in general, but it seems like the full release will allow you to change between different abilities and fever skills per class as you rank up. Each area requires the survivors to complete a specific objective to be able to open the door and move on. This is usually done by completing a simple item puzzle, activating keycard panels, or destroying specified objects, and clearing an area does add extra time to the clock as well. There are also a number of items to find on the map, whether it be healing items or umbrella credits. These credits are used at the item boxes found at the start of each area or the safe rooms that players can slip into, which is sometimes helpful to escape from enemies. Here you can buy ammo, which in this game uses only one type between all firearms, repair kits for the new melee weapons, healing items, or extra firepower, with more powerful weapons being available to buy as you advance to a new area. If the survivors make it to the final door, you can either leave as a group or you can leave the other survivors behind, depending on how hectic the situation may get. I have no idea if this really affects anything at all due to the nature of the beta, but in the full game, I assume leaving together gets you better rankings that will get you more points to level up with or something like that. The Mastermind, on the other hand, is a little more interesting to play as in comparison, since you have to hop between different camera angles placing down traps and enemies to impede the survivor's progress. Each enemy or trap placed down takes energy that recharges over time, with more useful ones taking more energy than others. Dealing damage to the survivors causes the match timer to decrease, with successful downs and kills subtracting off a bigger chunk of time. Although killing a survivor isn't the end of the road for them, as a dead survivor will eventually respawn as long as there is still time on the clock. That does kind of remove the threat of dying as a survivor a little bit, but there is still some sort of penalty. There are also certain types of zombies that you can take direct control of to try and deal even more damage, such as an armored zombie that can withstand bullets, or one that regenerates health over time. Similar to the survivors, however, the Mastermind also eventually gets to use his ultimate ability, which in this case is spawning and taking direct control of Mr. X. Daniel was the only playable Mastermind in the beta, which means other Masterminds will have different ultimate bioweapons outside of Mr. X. I'm actually very curious to see what they could possibly be. Playable Birkin? I mean, he's in the RE2 engine, that'd be easy. Wait a minute. Playable Steve Burnside? So does all of this actually make Project Resistance fun to play? Honestly, it was pretty fun. At least at first. Playing around with the Mastermind was probably the most fun part of the beta. I liked being able to mess around and overwhelm the survivors with all the various tools available. That, and it was pretty awesome to be able to control Mr. X himself, especially after dealing with him from the opposite end in the RE2 remake. And in general, I do like what the gameplay of the Survivor side is going for, encouraging team play and coordination, as well as using the right abilities at the best possible time to help survive against the Mastermind's forces. Also, using the RE2 remake as a base for how the characters play is also a plus for me personally. Now keep in mind that I said the game was fun to play initially. The thing is, once I ended up playing more and more matches, a ton of issues started to rear its half-eaten head, which sadly ended up dragging my enjoyment down to near spiteful levels. For starters, while the Mastermind was fun, I can't help but feel that each match is skewed a little too far in his favor. In my first ever match where I was still getting a hang of him, I was just spawning some enemies right next to the survivors, yes, you can actually do that, as well as using the machine gun ability to get some hits in. And despite admittedly not playing all that smart, I managed to win when the survivors were near the end of the last area just because I was able to take them out as Mr. X. That, and when directly controlling a zombie, as well as Mr. X in this case, spamming the punch button was their most effective attack as survivors don't have any invincibility frames. This technically means you can stun lock the survivors. Also, if an AI zombie grabs a player and you're controlling an enemy, you can reduce their health from max to 0 in no time, as players can still take damage while in the grab and bite animation. Many times it feels like even a bad Mastermind player can still win based on brute force instead of smart, thoughtful play. Between the matches where I played as the Mastermind and where I played as a survivor, I never once lost a Mastermind match. But hey, at least you can use broadcast mode to voice chat directly to the survivors, though all I did was blast this over my mic. Speaking of playing as the survivors, these matches were where a large amount of my eventual frustration stemmed from. The auto-aim passive that the beta forces the survivors to have equipped actually hinders the shooting, making it harder than it should be to aim for specific body parts. The game also has a few melee weapons aside from the guns, and they don't feel particularly great to use. My biggest issue is actually trying to use them on enemies on the ground. If you look directly at the floor, you'll do an overhead swing towards the ground, but if your aim isn't in the right spot, you'll instead do forward swings and then maybe do the overhead after you miss a ton. It adds an extra level of jank that makes it feel worse than it should be. What's even more baffling is how the game doesn't have any sort of communication options if you don't use or have a microphone. Trying to help guide other teammates without a mic is next to impossible, as I've seen some players get lost on where to go, causing precious time to be wasted. All there needs to be is some kind of preset text messages for all the necessary things in order to have these kinds of players help the team. I really hope that this is one oversight that does get looked at. Combine that with being on the receiving end of the more overpowered Mastermind techniques that I mentioned earlier, and my enjoyment of being a survivor became way less fun over time in Project Resistance. Now, using your abilities and fever skills effectively can help mitigate the lopsided balance, as well as eventual map memorization, but it really comes down to the player and how they use them in this regard. It also doesn't help that a quitter can make everything worse for the remaining survivors. May as well just give a free win in the Mastermind at that point. Also, one minor gripe, the beta wouldn't let you play with parties with friends, and I honestly wish I could have been able to. Visually in its current form, the game looks pretty good actually. It is using the RE engine, more specifically the build used for the RE2 remake, and it does show, but it does lose a lot of quality in comparison due to how much more stuff is going on despite some of the more enclosed spaces. The frame rate also takes more noticeable dips, but I played on a regular PS4, so I have no idea if the Pro mitigated this or how the beta ran on other platforms. A lot of the sound effects are reused from the RE2 remake as well, and still sound great here, but the voice acting is almost all over the place. Between hearing Daniel constantly during a match among random lines from the survivors, let's just say it's Resident Evil voice acting alright.
I know Kung Fu!
Now, being a closed beta, bugs are expected to occur, and of course, I came across quite a few bugs. Some of these bugs were occasionally pretty funny ones, aka the ones I like seeing but should be fixed. Invisible Mr. X? Are you f***ing serious?
What?
It's just his head! He's a floating head!
Here's a floating head.
But a lot of bugs I encountered actually made some matches even more frustrating and borderline unplayable, and are ones that absolutely need to be fixed. Some matches caused my HUD to not appear at all, which actually prevented me from interacting with anything. I couldn't open doors, pick up key items, or use the inventory. The bug only fixed itself if we managed to get past Area 1. One bug had me stuck trying to revive a teammate forever, and there was nothing I could do except get killed. And this isn't considered a bug, but for a majority of the matches I played, the netcode was just really bad. So many bullet and melee hits were so delayed that a lot of the time it felt like they didn't even do damage to an enemy at all. If shooting a shotgun point blank at a zombie's head feels like it did absolutely nothing due to lag, that is simply unacceptable. I know for a fact that I don't have bad internet, so this is another aspect that needs to be looked at in testing. But hey, at least I was able to let Capcom know about the issues I ran into by filling out the survey they put out for the closed beta. The sometimes hilariously mistranslated and typo-filled survey, but a survey nonetheless. But as far as I'm aware, the game itself is being outsourced, so I have no idea if that will even matter in the end. So yeah, I didn't have the best time with the Project Resistance beta, and that really bums me out. I can actually see some pretty good potential here, but at the end of the day, the experience I had in the closed beta left me bitter and somewhat apathetic to the game. I will give Project Resistance this though, even in its beta form. I like it more than Operation Raccoon City, and I definitely like it more than Umbrella Corps, but that game is at the bottom of the barrel, so that really isn't a high bar to clear. Since as of this video, there still isn't a release date or release window, let alone a finalized title for the game, I really hope Capcom takes all the feedback into good consideration and turns Project Resistance into something that can truly be fun and special. I may have had somewhat of a bad time, but I am seriously hoping for a positive turnaround on this one.
Oh, I'm a floating head, huh?